Tonight we have Melanie Kirchdorfer, who was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, Berkshire's UFO, and she's going to detail much of what was cut out of the episode, like the facts, the ongoing activity, the incident being deemed historically true, and its ties to the secret space program. And we also have Windyann, who was featured on Yes Theory. She'll talk about her personal sightings in Sprague Electric, where her grandfather actually worked, which manufactured the goodwill message that was left on the moon. So let's get to it. Hey, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Tom.
Absolutely.
How are
Absolutely.
you both?
Oh, we're doing great.
Well,
It's warm here.
Not here.
Cold here.
We have the
I heard
fireplace going.
So what I think what I'm going to do is turn this over to Matt for a little bit to ask some questions to you guys, because I know you much better than he does. So yeah, so go ahead, Matt, just fire away.
all right. I bid you greetings and salutations, lovely ladies.
That was
Hopefully you girls are having a good evening.
We are.
And I also want to say thank you for coming on with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Very excited
Not
to
a
be
problem.
here.
Now, my first set of questions is going to be for Windyann. You were the granddaughter of one of the people that worked on the goodwill message out of Sprague, correct?
Yes. My grandfather worked for Sprague for years and years. And Tom and I made the connection recently when, in the past few years, when we've been talking about the Berkshire UFO activity. I had a sighting, my family and I. And when Tom mentioned Sprague, we made this connection. My grandfather worked for years. So, yeah.
Okay. And he was working there at the time of Tom's incident, I believe, or just prior to it, correct?
Correct. Yep. He worked there from the 60s all the way until retired, and that was in the 90s. Yep. So a majority of his professional career was working for Sprague. He was a drafter. He was responsible for drawing out the molds. And we found that Sprague worked on the Apollo missions and most importantly, helped to engineer the goodwill message, which was placed on the moon, I believe, a mere 6 weeks before Tom and Melanie's experience here in 1969.
And that particular, I was going to say that particular facility is not far away from where the event happened. So the origin of it,
right.
its manufacturer is right down the street.
Right here in the Berkshires. It's in North Adams, Sprague Electric. And really, it's just hit home to me how much the history is really soaked in here. You know, people that live here have family members that worked on some of these projects, you know, unbeknownst even to the family members. So the history is really, really big here.
All right. Now, your grandfather was a former service person, I believe. Air Force, correct?
Yes, he was in the Air Force. He got out of the Air Force right at the end of World War II. And that's when he started working for GE and then later, a little bit later, for Sprague. Yep.
Okay. So he has a history of working on classified things and you know, governmental things. So it makes sense that he would be involved in something like this because of his experiences. Now, did he talk about this with you?
I wish he was here to ask him. He's not.
But did he ever talk about working on the missions?
He didn't. And, you know, I was thinking about it on the way here about, you know, wishing that I could talk to him, but also just thinking about the types of people that probably worked on this goodwill message. It was kind of a different era when information was really tightly held to the breast by a lot of people. And there was a lot of pride in, you know, not sharing information. So if he did know anything, you know, I'm sure he just kept it close to home.
Makes sense. Now, do you want to get into your experience that you had recently? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to share what happened to us. It was May 29th, 2020. So it was Memorial Day week that day. a small campfire outside. I live right in downtown Great Barrington, actually one of the closest residents to the WSBS radio station, which is part of Tom and Melanie's experience from that night. So we were sitting around the campfire and we saw a flash in the field, and after a few seconds it wasn't the same intermittent flash of an airplane. It was, seconds in between, and as the flashing continued, there was maybe 4 or 5 across the field. The flash got brighter and bigger, and then it was right above the house, and we couldn't really see it, but when it flashed the last time, you could definitely tell something was sort of there blocking out the stars above. And then I said to my sister, there were 6 of us there. And she said, no, look, they're all around. And we looked up, and what looked like tiny little constellation stars were actually, there was maybe 25 or 30 of them. They were actually moving, and they were all moving at the same rate of speed. They kind of formed like a half, making kind of different shapes. And then I saw 3 of them come together above the barn in a triangle, go back apart, and then they sort of all disappeared. So it was really short experience. We weren't able to get a video. It was just so intense at the moment. But it was incredible. I mean, I can tell you that it wasn't planes, wasn't satellites, it wasn't space trash. It was intelligent, whether it be, Melanie and I have talked, if extraterrestrial, military, paranormal, I don't know, but it was absolutely and very current. This was last year. So.
Yes. Now, you had a couple of people with you witnessing this, as you said, and they all agreed on seeing the same thing, correct?
Absolutely. My 11-year-old daughter had a conversation about, what we saw and what that means. So as a parent, that was a little difficult, but also my mom, my sister, her partner, my partner at the time. So it was pretty intense. There were 6 of us. And luckily I have those people to refer to. So I know, we're all strong in knowing what we saw.
So I want to, if I can jump in for a second. So I think what's really ironic here is that I think, Melanie and I, and you weren't living in Massachusetts at the time, but there was a lot of activity just prior to 69 too, 66, 67, 69, some cases in the 70s. And then there were the crop circles that showed up in 2013 and 14, I believe, in Sheffield, and then your incident. And what I'd like to point out to listeners is this is all within like a 3-mile area.
Yes.
And
really
now
close.
you've got where this and WSBS radio that went on the air asking for people to, point out where you're seeing these things. Now it's actually happening right over the radio station that actually broadcasts this and whose documentation hangs in Roswell. And it's still happening 50 years later.
Correct.
And now we've got the corn that's growing, 15 to 17 feet in height in these areas. There's
Recently,
something happening
too.
locally.
Yeah, because of what I experienced, I have been more vocal just about belief in something greater. And that has led me to get to know all kinds of people, including you and Melanie, and now you, Matt. In the last week or 2, I've had a few people come to me with some experiences. One in Lakeville, Connecticut, another one on a cattle farm in Sheffield. So, and that was same thing, just recent,
How far away as the crow flies is Lakeville, Connecticut from where you are? Just so other people will understand.
Half hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's probably maybe 15 miles.
Yeah.
It's not far at all. Not far at all.
Now, I'm familiar with the area, but just another question. If I'm not mistaken, isn't there a military base right nearby?
Westfield.
There
Correct.
is. Yeah, Westfield Air Force Base. It's about 45 minutes from here. Yep.
Okay. And that base has been around for a long time. That was there when you guys were younger in the incident that you had, Melanie, it was still an active base then, correct?
Right. And you have General Electric, you have Pratt and Whitney.
Yep.
There's all sorts of government connections
A
here.
lot of industrial stuff in this area that
And
you
you
don't
had
even realize is here.
cattle mutilations as well. Remember
That's
that?
right.
Yeah,
That's right.
something's going on over there. So, Melanie, you want to? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, anytime you have things like a water source, a military base, railroad tracks, agriculture, you usually have activity from wherever, if you know what I mean. But those key ingredients usually have a higher degree of sightings in the area versus someplace that just out in the middle of nowhere that has nothing, if you know what I mean. Just basic rural farmland or suburbia,
Right.
if you understand what I'm saying.
And you have NORAD towers too, and Pittsfield or Dalton, I believe it is. You got the NORAD towers. I mean, this pocket, the Berkshires, was just unbelievable back in the '60s. I mean, you had Command Aerospace, Pratt and Whitney, Sikorsky, GE, the NORAD towers, like I said, and like there's train tracks that go right through Sheffield. Not that really makes to me, I don't really quite know the point of that, except that you could get things in and out of that area pretty secretly without anyone seeing
And
anything.
I feel like
Well, that's how
don't you
most
agree with
nuclear
Melanie?
things are transported.
Right.
Do you know that? Yeah, by rail.
Trains have picked up lately than ever.
I just feel like if there were secrets here over the years, they probably stayed here. They stayed here with the people that have this. They didn't go much farther than the people's front doors. You know, if you really get to know the people that are here, it's that type of community where you don't share things like that. You're not trying to, be a
Tight-lipped.
whistleblower. Yeah.
We're trying to get people to talk. We're working on it. I have a girl that's calling, or a woman that's calling me tomorrow with some more information. I look
Okay.
forward
Hopefully
to
you'll
it.
be able to share it with us later on. Now, let me ask you a couple of questions, Melanie. First, would you like to share your story and your background? And then if you'd like to talk about, working with unsolved mysteries and yes theory and stuff like that, and what may or may not have been left in or out.
For me, that was not my first time that it had happened. It had happened to me all through my childhood, but that's what they focused on Unsolved Mysteries. And that, for me, like I said, on Unsolved Mysteries, my sister and I had worked that weekend, and we had gone with my parents to get ice cream. And all I remember seeing that evening, or the sun was about to go down, it was around 7:30 in the evening, and it was a huge light. It was an amber bronze color light that I remember. I was so traumatized because I knew once I saw this coming over the lake, it was at Lake Mansfield. I knew that they were coming for me because it had happened all throughout childhood. And I want to chase this. He swore and said, "Oh, I got to chase this." We were all screaming. There was so much commotion in the car. And he started to chase it. And my mother said, "No, Joey, no, don't do that." And next thing I remember from there is being levitated over Berkshire Heights. And you can't move when it happens to you. Your eyes. And I knew it was Berkshire Heights because I lived in that neighborhood. You could see the peaks. I knew the peaks of the roof from my eyes. And ironically, the woman that's contacting me tomorrow, that's where their incidences took place. From there, I just remember being in a room, and ironically, it was very similar to what I found out afterwards. Tom's situation was like. It was very industrial like. I remember there were these, it was almost like those glass 1960s glass bricks, but on the outside of them there was this red glow, the red, orange, bronze glow that you could see coming through them. And then in the opposite wall, it was like it was all metallic. It was very industrial looking. I don't remember seeing anything then. I had seen these little gray men before then, but at that time I don't remember. But I think I was so traumatized at that time that I blocked it all out because I don't remember that day seeing anything. From there, from that room, I remember being in another room that was full of children. They were small, from children all the way up to teenagers, older children, maybe 17, 18 years of age. And I just remember holding on to my knees and putting my head down, and then I would look up to see the other children. I didn't know anyone there. Tom Warner said that he knew me, that he saw me. Another one that's come forward from Florida who said that she recognized me. And then from there, I woke up at like 5:30 the following morning. The sun was starting to come up. And I was all by myself on the beach of Lake Mansfield, and I had really bad stomach pains. I had to walk from there. I remember what I was wearing. I had cut off denim shorts and a lime green sweatshirt, which was one of my favorite sweatshirts. And I had to walk home from there to my house, which was not that far away. We used to walk it all the time. I lived on Castle Hill. And I walked home. My mother always locked the door. She still can't remember, or that morning it wasn't locked. They don't remember how they got home. And I went into the house, climbed up the stairs, got into bed with my sister, and we were told the next morning to never talk about it. We were told, just don't talk about it. And we were never allowed to talk about it. And then 3 years ago, my mother called me and told me I needed to go to the Historical Society and tell them what happened. And I'm like, are you kidding me? After you told me all these years that it never happened? I knew it happened because it was happening our whole life when we were children growing up.
Hey, Melanie,
but for her to then call me and tell me that.
How big would you say that craft was?
It was huge. It was so big that all I remember is a giant lake covering the whole lake.
So like 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards?
Easily 100. I mean, it was huge. It was just, it covered the whole lake, the light.
Now it had some light to it?
Yeah. It was just a giant, it covered the whole lake.
Well, what did the craft look like?
I had my head down on my dad's seat. I remember smelling wool. He had a wool army blanket, and I remember having my head down on the seat and smelling the army blanket that he had down. It was chaos in that car.
Now you said it had like a reddish tint to it, correct? Like a reddish glow?
Yes, it was like a red, bronze, amber glow, and it was like a fire. It was like on fire.
The whole thing, or just part of it?
The whole thing. Well, I remember there were these weird, like I remember there was like these weird lights coming off of it too. It was crazy. It was all crazy. It was so scary.
Now the lights coming off of it, were they also like a red or were they like a white?
There were some different colors, but it was mainly this red bronze glow. It's hard to even describe it, but those other colors, they would come off of it, but it was mainly this red bronze amber glow that I remember.
And what time was that?
That was about 7:30
Okay.
at night, like before the sun would go down in September.
So you could see it clearly in the daylight,
Wow.
right? Correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And the date? What was
It
the
was
date?
Labor Day weekend.
Okay, yeah.
It was our first Labor Day weekend.
It took place about an hour before our incident, actually. 3
Right.
miles down the road, yeah.
Yeah.
So Melanie, what do you think is driving this activity?
Well, I think there could be three possibilities. When, for the longest time, I thought that it could be paranormal activity. In fact, I think I told you I even went to South Dakota thinking it could be the little people. Both Windyann and I have researched King Philip's War that took place, because this always takes place around water.
That's where
And
I
so I
live,
think there could
is the
be,
King Philip's War area. I'm right in the heart of it. That's
and
Wow.
we
where I
are
live.
too, actually. Where the Great Windyann was is where the Congregational Church was in Great Barrington. And so it could be a combination. I mean, where Tom had his incident, that whole field, there are artifacts in there, and they've been asked to please do not remove any of the artifacts there.
Arrowheads. Yeah.
Arrowheads, tomahawks, anything. I mean, I found a sundial up at Umpachini Falls and I reburied it. So this whole area is full of First Nation people, their artifacts. So there's a link between the First Nations people and UFOs. We all know that. I've traveled, I've spent time in the Mayan ruins, and you can see the drawings on the wall. And there could be a combination of that. It could be the government and the UFOs. It could be all three things going on. We know there's a lot of paranormal activity going on. A friend of mine gave some photographs to Henry, my husband, of UFO photos from Cherry Hill, right near where Jane Green had her incident happen. And this is exactly where Patty sees UFOs all the time. And this is in Monument Mountain, right before where Windyann
It's
had
right
her
on the
incident.
other side of Monument Mountain is where Jane Green saw and Cherry Hill. And then I'm on the other side of Monument Mountain. Yeah.
And then I just found out from Windyann that across the street, that whole area is full of rose quartz, which is full of energy. So you start adding all of this up, and it all makes sense. I mean, there's something going on here. It's and Windyann and I are trying to figure it out. I want to talk to more people that live in the Berkshires, because I know that it's not just us that are seeing these things. People are just afraid to talk about it.
Or it's so commonplace that it's just another day in the Berkshires. We saw something in the sky last night, so we just want people to talk about it more.
In school, Melanie, I've talked about this before, how all those kids were drawn the little UFOs they saw around the area, and they were like taping them to the chalkboard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There were a lot of sightings back in 69. I actually found a report. I'm going to put it up here really quick. This was a report about a sighting in Egremont in 69.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we've
Wow.
got the crop circles, but I didn't get that put up yet. But there's so much activity. Here's something else I found. This was a document my father got back from the United Nations back in 1992 about all the activity that was already reported going back to 1974. Now, Melanie, you actually ate at our parents' diner back in the 60s, correct?
Oh, I grew up hanging out down in Sheffield on Umpachini Falls. We would stop there and pick up takeout food.
Sure.
And we would get takeout from your diner.
Yeah. And that diner right there, so people know that a lot of people that worked in the space race or community or what have you would eat there on weekends. Some drop their children off once in a while. My mother would cook for them. So within those walls of that diner, what I just put up, people would talk about anything they wanted. But like you said, once you left,
That was a safe space because your mom believed in it. Your mom could talk to
saw it.
her about it.
Right. Kind of like, I guess like, you go to church and you could talk to God in church, but you don't do that in aisle 5 at Walmart. Right. But the point is, like in Great Barrington and Sheffield back in the day, I remember everybody talking about it, but that's because I practically lived in a diner. So, but outside that, you didn't really talk about it because people could get, lose their jobs because they worked on the secret space program. They worked at Sprague, they worked on different things. So they didn't want to have it come up that maybe they were leaking something out. They were saying too much. So with that, and here's another thing for Tom J to actually say that it was swamp gas to Jan Green makes no sense because he had left his house that night as a ham operator, went down to the radio station asking people to tell him where he was seeing things. So when Jan Green went there to tell him where she saw it, for him to say that makes no sense. Unless he was just joking with her.
I think people didn't want to admit it, that it could possibly be happening.
I mean,
You
it
guys
just is
want to know what
mind-blowing.
swamp gas is?
Go ahead, Matt.
All right. Swamp gas, or otherwise known by other people as willow of the wisp, is basically a degradation of rotting material giving off a methane gas that ignites. Your average swamp gas that ignites lasts for all of about roughly about 0.8 of a second, and it's about a size of a grapefruit at most.
Okay, so it
That would
doesn't.
have been possible.
It
Yeah,
doesn't.
that's a lot of meth.
And one
Yeah.
night over where Jane Green was, and then where I was, and then where Tom was. I mean, we're talking miles away.
Well,
Yeah.
number two, it usually does not get any higher than 6 to 8 feet off the ground.
Well, the fact that he would say that, he was probably joking, I would think. I'm hoping because it would make no sense. But anyway, so something else. So there's mining being done in Canaan back in the day. The magnesium that was mined near Sheffield where this was taking place, actually that magnesium was used in the atom bomb. So they were mining in Canaan.
There's another twist
another
right
connection,
there.
yeah.
Another connection.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And there used to be a nuclear power plant or something in the area. So Windyann, what do you think is going on over there? I mean, like Melanie, maybe it's just a combination of military, something happening. The space race, NASA was actually in Massachusetts at the time too. So it's kind of, I bat my head
Yeah,
against the wall because I've been part of this too.
I feel like that is the magic of this mystery, is that there are lots of different avenues that you explore. Something is clearly going on in the Berkshires, and it has been since the 60s or before, as far back as the native people, not sure. But the magic of this mystery is that there's so much here that it really takes it takes your imagination a little bit to start to, think outside the box, basically. But after I saw what we saw, it's a mystery, but it's definitely, it's life-changing. When you start to really think about the world, the universe, our place in it, mine has been opened, and how much I've learned. It's pretty amazing. So for me, I'm not sure what it is, but I know that things are definitely going on here.
Yeah, I've always said that where we were taken underground, and that's only because of how mundane and industrial the area that I was in looked. And something else that was a little bit different than Melanie's, we had 3 objects that night. There was one to our left, one to our right, and then the craft at about like 11 o'clock in front of us. So we were like in the middle of a triangle. And that's when we felt like we were underwater. Everything was muted. And then all of a sudden life came back normally, and then it was all muted again. And so it really affected us, how we reacted, how placid we became, and so on and so forth. And if the listeners don't know that, something else that Unsolved Mysteries should have mentioned was that this case went before the United Nations in support of General Assembly 33-426. And so between that and getting deducted into state and being deemed historically true, and all these things that are happening for the state of Massachusetts to agree that this was historically true, it almost makes you wonder if they know more or they have the answers that we're looking for. Because why would they be so? Yeah, exactly.
But one thing that you and I did have in common, I forgot to bring. We both remember the clicking. There was that click, 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 that MRI sound.
Yeah, we both remember that
as well, which I still have every single night. I can't get rid of it in my head. It's in my ears. This click, 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 click sound. It never went away. It drives me crazy every night. It still happens. And you said that you heard that as well.
Oh yeah,
that night.
It was tap, tap, tap. At first, it sounded to me like stones hitting the underneath of our fender wall of our vehicle. But because of the state I was in, when we were going down that dirt road, which was like 3 miles from where you were, like an hour later, I heard this tap, 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 tap. And when I went to get an MRI later on in life, it was a deeper sound, like boom, 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 boom. But it was still that repetitive tapping sound. It was a little different sounding to me. But then again, I was a lot younger then too, so we remember things a little bit differently. But that's when I was getting the MRI once. I was like, oh my God, I was kind of freaking out. I was like, I need a Valium. Something's kicking back up again. Yeah.
All right. You're triggering something in me, something I should share with you guys. Well, you already know, Tom, but I am also an experiencer. Have been ever since I was a little kid. Okay. When you're talking about that repetitive tapping sound, I had the same kind of thing. And what it sounded like to me is when you put a baseball card in the spokes of a bike, that repetitive, like it was like when you're pedaling with the bike and you have the playing card or the baseball card in the spokes. You understand what I'm referring to?
Oh, I had one on my bike. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
So you
same
guys
type
have all
of.
heard the same sound in your experiences. All three of you have heard the exact same.
Yep.
Here every single night. It drives me crazy.
And then
the hardest time.
Yeah, and then the reddish glow of the shell. Because when we saw it, it had no lights coming out of the bottom of it. It didn't have landing gear, no windows, nothing like that. It just looked like, I've always said, a turtle shell. But the skin of it would emit a light, like a reddish glow to it. I'll never forget that. With the tapping sound, which is one of the reasons I believe Melanie from get-go, because I had never really mentioned that before. And she's like, oh, I had this red look to it.
He didn't tell me anything. I told him.
It's like a little piece of information. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very unique.
The light that we saw, the first initial that we saw in the sky, like I said, it was like seconds in between. So it wasn't like a constant flash. It only flashed 4 or 5 times in the 30 seconds that it was going over. But it made like a tulip shape in the sky, like a bulb and then kind of a little tail. So, and it looked like flash was almost like propel object, if that makes any sense. So you'd see like this big flash, and then you felt like it was moving when the flash happened. So it was pretty wild.
This is a mystery that we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, it's funny because 1969 really got the attention of everybody because it was a holiday. And there were so many.
Exactly, but it's been going on. It's not just 1969.
No, that's what I'm saying. So 1969 got the attention because it was a holiday, and so many people were outside and actually saw it in these large groups that normally wouldn't have been together. So there was no protecting the secret that something was happening, because there were 20, 30 people at a cookout, and they're like, oh my God, and then the kids started drawing to things in school. So, but like you said earlier, this was happening long before 69. And it's now 2021, and it's still happening. And I've got some pictures that someone sent me of like a roundish sphere in Sheffield over corn. And then, of course, just a few years ago, there were those crop circles that showed up. No, I'm not an expert on crop circles, but
Stay underground too, Tom, just from living in the Berkshires. If you wanted to hide something,
that's the place.
a good place to do it.
And you're
How
only
about-
an hour from New York City.
What about all the Bigfoot reports from there?
that people
Well, there was
have.
actually a case where the town of Great Barrington in the 1700s, several farmers were tired of getting their food ripped off from them. And they tracked down one of these things, found it sleeping in the woods, and actually shipped it to Cambridge, Mass, where it was an attraction at a zoo. This is documented.
Wow.
And I'm friends with people that run Squatchachusetts. I do a lot. I got my fingers in every type of paranormal thing. But the biggest concentration of Bigfoot reports are right out where you guys are at the Berkshires. And the other concentration that had the highest reports are where I am at the Bridgewater Triangle. So
Yes.
go figure.
I think October Mountain is where they've had a lot of sightings in Lee.
Correct.
Now, do you know about the underground caverns in the old railroad and stuff like that? That's under the huge underground caverns that go from town to town to town. It's all on online. You can see it. It's on
No, I
Wikipedia
didn't know
actually.
about those.
Yeah. So again, this is why I always thought that we were underground, but
Yep.
yeah,
Hmm.
because where we were too was huge. It was much bigger than the craft we saw. So I've always been under the impression that we were at the wrong place at the wrong time, saw something we shouldn't have, and government came out, extracted us from the vehicle, because when we were taken from the car was running and my mother had pulled it over. And Melanie was in a car too. So that's kind of unique. And we're both around water, but the car was still running and the windows were open. We're looking at the thing. We went out like it was like this heavy weight of like when you're deep underwater, this pressure. And then everything went kind of, like placid. And then everything came back to life. There was a flash, crickets, and we could hear everything again. And then we were out and we were no longer in the car anymore. And when we found ourselves back in the vehicle, the lights were off, the ignition was off, and the keys were still in the car. So that sounds to me like,
Wow.
on top of that, my mother and grandmother were reversed. My grandmother was now in the driver's seat when she drove us all to get help at Silk's. So Silk's convenience store. So that seems to me like for someone to turn off the ignition, turn off the lights, and then make it an error, having now my grandmother in the driver's seat who was previously in the passenger seat just seems like human error to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me
I
to,
see what you mean about the human error piece, and even just
and with all the military in the area, I've always thought that there was a joint effort of some kind.
When I start going in that direction, then I remember when they were filming, they had me filming the street that I had all my incidents occur on Russell Street. And the woman she was telling her husband Henry, I think that there's a portal on this street. So every time I go in one direction, then I get pulled out down to the other
Think
direction.
of another piece.
That's why I think that it could be all three of them.
Yeah, it probably is. It probably is.
I mean, you
It's
lived in that neighborhood too at one point. Remember where?
Oh, yeah.
Where the milk exchange is.
I live right down the street. Yeah.
Again, I worked at
I
the
was-
Jug Inn. I worked at Mahawi. You worked at Mahawi. It's too coincidental.
I know. Yeah. It is quite, hey, we met for a reason, I guess,
Military
right?
and
Well,
kept the secret.
some people know. I find it ironic, and I'll just put this up for a minute, that the governor of Massachusetts would issue something stating that this really happened if they didn't know something more than we do. I mean, there's a kind of a reason for these documents to say what Melanie and I experienced was historically true in the state of Massachusetts. Passing our polygraph tests and the radio archives on WSBS, which is right down the road from where you saw your incident 50 years later. All the activity, the the crop circles, the cattle mutilations, the connection to Sprague, the moon, 69, the moon landing. There in it, and for it to still be happening, it's kind of like a base was set up a long time ago. We don't know where it is, and it's still active. Have you
Yeah,
heard about
It's
the
definitely
sightings
active.
of military coming out of being seen coming out of the woods with radios? Did you hear about that?
No.
Yeah, right around Pine Island Farm.
I
Government
didn't know
people walking out of the woods with basically not guns or anything, but just like, camouflage, and they got their radios strapped to them and stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
when was
it's
this?
insane.
In 69?
No, this was like just before COVID.
Wow. And that's when we
Mhm.
saw our sighting. It was right after that.
What month was it?
It was May 29th, 2020.
Right.
Yeah, it was the
Okay,
Sunday
'cause
of
a lot of
Memorial Day weekend.
which again is another holiday.
I know.
I think the girls are right that there's a base or something going on in this area or that area, and it has something to do with minerals.
They were mining back in the 50s and 60s in Canaan. They started mining. So there's a connection to
There's
mining as well.
mines up in Beartown Forest has some old mines.
They're all
Mostly
over the mines. I mean, the quarry right down the road.
right.
There's quarries all over here.
A rare compound or mineral.
Well,
It could
the
be
interesting
something.
thing about quartz,
It's energy.
certain quartz has piezoelectric charge, meaning like you compress it, and with that energy of compressing it, it creates an electrical charge. I mean, I feel the energy in this area, and like I said, I've said it before, it's either in the people or in the ground, and I'm just
Yep.
not sure yet.
All right. Well, listen, I just got a text. We got to run. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Windyann.
Hope we were helpful.
Thank you, girls.
Okay.
It
Good
was really
chatting
Night,
with
great.
you.
Thank you guys.
Likewise.
Looking
Good night.
forward to seeing you.
Yep. I'll be up there tomorrow. Okay. Bye.
Safe travels.